Okay. I'm guessing the audience can hear me. I can hear myself, so that's good news. We've got people joining us. Looks as though that's it. So we're started off. Fantastic. And this is me keeping you from the bar. So we're going to try our best to stay on time. As the last speaker said, there is a big clock ticking down to past when the bar opens. So hopefully we can whet your appetite for some great conversation. So I would like to first of all start by asking my esteemed panelists to give a quick introduction of themselves, maybe starting with you, Karin.
Okay. Thank you very much. So my name is Karin Svensson. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer of the Volvo Group. The Volvo Group is one of the world's leading manufacturers of truck, construction equipment, buses, engines, etc.
Good day. My name is Sapanta Dori. I'm Vice President of Decarbonization at Teck Resources. Teck is the largest Canadian mining diversified company, and we produce steelmaking coal, copper, and zinc.
So, hello everyone. My name is Piashad. You can call me Isla Pakdi. I'm a CEO of BRANDi and Companies. We're basically a management consulting specializing in transforming the company into a future ready by embracing people, profit, planet into their core at a system level transformation.
Hi everyone, Rohitesh Tawan, or Ro for short. I'm the CEO of ICMM, which brings together a third of the global mining industry, including tech, in our commitment to sustainable development.
Fantastic. And my name's Adam Woodhall. I am the CEO and founder of Lawyers for Net Zero, which specializes in working only with the general counsel, the top lawyer within large corporates. So it's the in-house lawyers. And I was particularly interested in this panel because the hard-to-abate sectors are where it actually gets difficult. So the last panel we're talking about some things which actually even if the government doesn't necessarily realize this, are some of the easy-to-abate areas, such as installing heat pumps, putting things into houses to make sure that they're well insulated. And it's a shame that, unfortunately, Joanna can't join us today, because there are other things, for example, in construction with Balfour Beatty, concrete, in shipping, in, obviously, flight, and then many of the things that I'm sure our panelists will be talking about today. So I kind of prepared some questions, which I'm, apart from the questions, probably not going to give any opinions, but the questions are a little bit chunkier, just to give some framing for each one of them. So my first question, which I'll be starting off with Kiran asking, is considering the huge scale of emissions from the hard-to-abate sectors, can you give me an example of how your business is generating exponential reductions in its emissions, not just in the scopes 1 to 3, but also in the use of your products, particularly regarding the short and long-term investments which are going to be required?
Yes, first of all, I need to say that there is really no silver bullet to solve all the emissions when it comes to the transport industry. However, we are involved in a number of activities that will eventually take us to net zero at 2040. And if there is one thing that will make the big difference in transportation, that's of course the electrification of vehicles and machines. But the starting point to understand our journey towards net zero is really to understand where our emissions comes from. And there, of course, we are committed to the science-based targets. And the science-based targets really help us to understand how much and how quickly we need to go down in order to stay within the Paris Agreement. So, as I said, our ambition is to be net zero by 2040, and we have interim targets for 2030. If we look upon our emissions from a value chain perspective, we can start with our products in use then, our scope 3. That's over 95% of all our emissions. And to reduce emissions here, the key is, of course, electrification and the broad introduction of electric vehicles. This is not new to us in any way. We have been delivering electric buses for over 10 years, and as we speak, we are delivering both trucks. We have a full range of electric trucks and construction equipment machines to the market. In just 7 years from today, in 2030, we expect that approximately 35% of all sold vehicles will be electric, and that's not only in Europe, but all over the world, globally. But also here, we cannot rely only on one solution. So we have a three-pathway approach from a technology perspective, you could say. So we look into battery electric vehicle, fuel cell electric vehicle, and then we think that there will also be room to a limited extent for the internal combustion engine to continue to work, but then will fossil-free fuels, biofuels, etc. You talked about investments, and there will be massive investments. Just if we look upon last year, we spent 2 billion euros in R&D investments. I think it's also important to mention that we need not only to outline our own activities, but also the activities needed that we are not directly influencing, like, for example, charging infrastructure, the need for green energy, as well as market incentives that are also prerequisites to get down the emissions from Scope 3 downstream. The second biggest source of emissions for us is Scope 3 upstream, and that's all the material that goes into our vehicles, like steel, aluminium, its batteries, etc. And here we are starting to decarbonize, and as we have more electrical vehicles on the road, there will be even more need there. And then, of course, the Scope 1 and 2, that's less than 1%, but still a lot of work to do to change to renewable energy, but also to put into efforts on energy efficiency activities. So to summarize, I think, it will not be enough to talk about ambitions, and really need to get down to business. But I guess we can come back a little bit to what that actually means.
Yeah, exactly. So, great answer there. And Sapanta, I think obviously everybody's going to be curious about yours because your company mines coal. So it's a really rich answer, a rich theme that I think will be mining in terms of your responses.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the introduction there. You know, when we look at our product suite, whether it's steelmaking coal as opposed to thermal, copper and zinc, these are all products for the future. All of these products are needed for clean infrastructure development, whether it's renewable infrastructure, solar, wind, or looking at trains and all the electric transportation of the future will require lots and lots of steel. So when we think about how we contribute, our first starting point is we have to minimize the carbon intensity of our own footprint vis-a-vis the production of these major commodities. And we're very proud because we sit in the first quartile of carbon intensity for all of these products. That's not accidental. It's years and years of operational improvement to ensure that we can leave the lowest possible footprint possible. That's great. There's still more work to do. And so we have a number of very ambitious targets, particularly in the mining sector, which is a very capital-intensive industry. Our first major target is net zero Scope 2 by 2025. That is a major undertaking where we're committing to having renewable energy feed all of our activities. We are going to get there by 25, and we will be one of the first miners, if not the first miner, to get there. That's a huge, huge progress. The second key piece is more challenging. It's converting all of our mines into the mines of the future that are going to be fully electrified, run on zero emissions, have no diesel, no natural gas, and there's a lot of work to do there. Part of it is the technology development associated with it, and we work very closely with organizations such as ICMM to help support the evolution of the technology that's really needed to run a clean mine. But the other part is fundamentally transforming our mines from the way they run today to autonomous fleet, battery electric, looking at every possible emission source and erasing those. And so to do that, we need near-term and long-term commitments. Our longer term is by 2030, we will reduce the carbon intensity of our business by 1/3. Now you might say, why just 1/3? Well, to get to that 1/3, we already need to transform our mines. And then we have the longer target of 2050, which is net zero. What are we doing about it today? We're doing a lot. We're looking at how we can use the technologies that are commercially available today to reduce our carbon emissions. We're looking at implementing and installing trolley assist, which is a commercially available technology all around the ramps where we can actually reduce diesel consumption by a power of 90%. We can reduce the number of trucks that we have in the future. We're looking at biofuels because, yes, it's a transitional technology, but it's all about making transitional movements until we're at the stage where we can completely move to zero-emission fleet. And on zero-emission fleet, we're working very closely with OEMs such as Caterpillar and Komatsu to procure trucks that are not technologically available today. They're not commercially available today, but we know they will be. And they will be because we will work with them. Organizations such as ICMM will work with them, other mining companies, these OEMs, to electrify these trucks so that we have hydrogen fuel cell, we have battery electric. At Tech, we have committed to procuring minimum of 30 trucks as early as 2027. And so there's a number of steps you need to take near term and long term. And I'll just say one thing because I know we're going to run out of time. The critical piece of moving towards a zero emission mine is managing the culture associated with how you do that. And so it's really, really key that we bring our employees along this progression so that truck drivers of today can move towards autonomous management of their fleet tomorrow. And that's another body of work that we're focused on.
Great, thank you. And so, I'll be asking you this next question, which is net zero is becoming devalued, unfortunately, because some companies are using it as to greenwash their reputations, creating these massive pledge action gaps. So we need to be aiming towards what we term legitimate net zero. For example, SBTi's net zero standard. Now, how can businesses work with other stakeholders to ensure we achieve legitimate net zero?
Okay, thank you for the question. I guess we have a good example here in the panel. The thing is, when you set the target of net zero, the hard truth is when you admit that you can't do this because of what and how can you abate it in the future. I mean, nowadays we see the companies going up and say, okay, we pledge a huge commitment. We said that we're going to be net zero on 2030, 40, 50, and etc. And this is the weird part of sustainability because you can't quantify it just like number in terms of money. You can say this, and next year people come back to you and say, I forgot it. I'm going ahead to another topic, which is like a trend catcher, you know what I mean. This is something happen in reality, but I guess to say something huge or to say that I'm going to be net zero is a good starting, but it isn't enough. It just needs to be combined with a set of action or the strategy that show up you linking between a story well told and action well done perfectly. So for my company, we always say that nowadays we are in the age that we have to market our corporate strategy as a product. Because people look at you, we are being more transparent. So we need to give them more information. Otherwise, they will dig deep into your company and discover something that you don't want them to know. So that is some parts of you need to know. So moving from likely to be greenwashing to be a story well told, action well done in alignment, I have some maybe 3 parts that you need to focus. The first one is about direction. I think the leader in the private sector need to understand the new relationship between values, between investment and result. So nowadays, we have shifted our interest of values in terms of making sole profitability into something beyond. And the word beyond is boundaryless. So it's hard to be quantified. You need to set where you stand firmly in the market. And that requires investment to accelerate the movement. In whatever, in the business, it is still the same. But you need to understand that what is it for them, for investor? Why they need to invest it? Why they have to pay for something that they don't have an idea what it comes out in the future. So it's a part that talking about result. So the result is coming to an end when we talk sustainability. What's exactly the result? Because this is a journey, right? Being net zero is like you you draw the line and say you will achieve as close as you can. But indeed, you can say that this year I achieved net zero. I'm talking about the founder, I'm talking with the founder of CDP yesterday morning, and we say like, okay, well, if you achieve something like carbon neutrality today, you keep that batch for like 10 years, 20 years, but we have no idea how exactly you operate your business in the next couple of years, maybe tomorrow. So that's the first one. The second one is about the position. So engaging stakeholder become more and more important nowadays, but there is some certain situation we need to look at it. For example, if I go say, I want to do net zero, when no one asks me to do, it means I am visionary. So when I am visionary, I need to lead by example. I need to redesign the social contract with all stakeholders that we cannot do business as usual. We have to go an extra mile. And what exactly we have to do? It's unlike in the past, you do business, you try to keep everything with you because you want to make as much as profit you can. But today you need collaboration. We often say that instead of having the competitiveness, we should strengthen our collaborativeness. Because to collaborate is difficult.
Yes.
It's not easy, right? You have a cake and you share it, fine. But you have to build an extra cake, make it larger, and everybody can satisfy with it. So that's the key part of the second one. So one is you do it without no one asking. The second one, you do it net zero by someone asking you to do, even forced you to do. It means in that situation, somebody already in that for you and say you need to do it. It becomes in different forms, maybe compliance, policy, or whatever it takes to force you to do. You don't need to communicate with them. You need to satisfy the conditions they give rise. Otherwise, your business will be threatening, will be out of competition, will not be able to scale up. And that is in the transitional situation that we are talking about. And the last one is when you are in the situation that you were forced to do by everyone. I mean, you are out of the visionary position. You become in crisis right now. And I think we are getting closer to that. We are all aware that things getting worse, the workplace problems is our next to the door and requiring our actions. So this is a position when you need to engage all stakeholders. And to look at your portfolio, the third one, I have 3 R's to look at. The thing is, you need to rethink about.
Can you make those 3 R's really quick?
Yeah, sure. You said time. Okay, sure.
No, you give us the 3 R's, but make it really quick.
Okay, sure. Okay, that's fine. Okay, very much. Okay, we have rethink about your value chain, your efficiency and effectiveness. Of course, in the past, you look at your efficiency and effectiveness.
Quick.
Yeah, sure, of course. You short it because you make money, right? Now you have to look in other parameters.
Yeah.
And the second one is look at your portfolio. So to navigate your supply side, for example, we work with oil and gas company. So you shift from oil and gas to renewable energy, of course. It's helpful, but it cannot convert the whole portfolio. The third one is to reimagine your businesses. You can use your competency, whatever you gain from existing business, to explore to the new business that potentially be good for planet and good for your business as well.
Great, thank you. So, Ro, last not least, and certainly, but you are last, in this line here. How do we enable corporate lobbying, because it's a very interesting area, and behind-the-scenes influencing, to transition from overall, there's a lot to focus on retaining and growing profits, to focusing on how we retain a livable planet for all?
I love the choice of words, Adam, because I find it's interesting in countries like the UK and the US, what's called lobbying is called corruption in the third world, where I've spent most of my time. So let's just be clear on what we're talking about. But I think the essence of your question is, how can we make sure that companies that have influence over society and governments are acting in responsible ways? It has 2 parts to it. What do companies do individually, and what do they do collectively? Because sometimes they can be different. You can have companies that have a public position to something, and then would use bodies that may appear to be like ICMM, trade associations, to argue for outcomes that actually serve parochial interests. Now, let me say something that will make me a target to each of you in the next few years, which is that if any collective association campaigns against the collective interests of society on sustainable development goals, they deserve the harshest sanction possible. And so if you find that ICMM or anyone, certainly me, if you find me saying something that you think acts against the collective interests of the world on sustainable development, I deserve to really be called out and face the harshest possible sanctions. Now, you might think it goes...
I'm going to drill down on that, though. It's not what you say publicly, it's what you're doing behind doors. Because
Completely.
as you say,
Yes.
a lot of companies are saying one thing publicly, and then they're allowing their trade body to do something privately. And this is why I guessed you wouldn't get on this stage if you weren't willing to answer this question. But it's like, as a trade body, how are you balancing that tension?
Look, a brilliant question. Let me give you a couple of examples. You might think that the days in which companies were trying to hold progress back have long gone with the oil and gas world that was trying to deny climate change. The reality is it's happening today. Look at what happened in Montreal in December. You had business groups that were trying to hold back the world from agreeing a target on biodiversity at COP15. And there were people that were actively undermining the specific goal that would have required companies to disclose their impacts on biodiversity. I'm proud to say we were not part of that group. We were part of the group led by Business for Nature. This was done privately, not publicly, that stood up and said, we want that goal agreed. Makes our life more difficult, but we want that goal agreed. And so that's the level of accountability that I think everybody needs to have. So, one level is that companies like Sepansa's have to report publicly which trade bodies they are a member of and what position those trade bodies have on specific issues. So if you notice that a trade body has not a good position on an issue and a company is part of that trade body, let's hold the company and the association accountable. But here's the slightly more sinister thing that's happening these days. Adam, I would say that delay is the new deny. So yes, we don't have outright climate deniers anymore, and if they are, they're in a special part of the world that thankfully we don't get to see in the mainstream world anymore. But there's lots of denialism that's cloaked in delayism. It sounds clever to say, well, we should be really thoughtful about this and let's not rush into this and let's just be careful about... Yes, but let's unpick that and see if that's really true. Sepansa gave a beautiful example of trucks. We use these giant trucks in mining, and I get asked so often, and Christian here, who leads our work on this, gets asked all the time, why can't you just switch to a zero-emission truck tomorrow if you're serious about decarbonization? And the reality is, all the money in the world could not buy a zero-emission mining truck today for the entire fleet. All the money in the world, just because it doesn't exist. But companies like Tech, supported by us, have been accelerating the development of those with the OEMs. So is that delaying tactics on our part? I would say no, but I should be asked that question and be forced to justify it.
No, great, and thank you for the transparency and honesty there. Now we are on the downward slope of we're over halfway through, so we'll need to we're speeding up as you can tell from my chairing energy. So, Karin, we'll go to you next. We have technological solutions that are already available for the hard-to-abate sectors, or there's many situations where there aren't clear route maps. Where there aren't solutions, there are clear route maps, such as actually some of these massive trucks. Now, beyond sort of what you can do internally, in a sense, how do we scale as industries the necessary solutions to make sure these things, so that Volvo can be providing these massive trucks to Tech within years, not decades?
Maybe on a side note, maybe we can discuss. Maybe we have some trucks for you, so that we can take.
I think we're already talking to you. So
yes,
we're in good shape.
But you're absolutely right. There are of course lots of technology available out there, but there is also lots of technology that are still in development phase or in very early development phases. Actually, almost half of the technologies that will be needed in order to take down emissions for 2050 are still in very early phases. And to accelerate these technologies and make them cost competitive and come to the market is going to be super crucial within the coming 10 years. And here I would like to mention an initiative that some of you might have heard of, that we are one of the founding members, called the First Movers Coalition. I think that is a great example of how companies can come together, and we are there utilizing our purchasing power to commit to buy a certain level of emission-free transports. Even if we are making trucks ourselves, we are also a huge buyer of transport solutions. We are also committed to buying a certain level of zero-emission steel and aluminium, and there are many sectors included into the First Movers Coalition. I think this is a good example of how we can share risk, how we can go into, for example, when we started looking into fossil-free steel, we don't have all the answers. We work together with the Swedish manufacturers SSAB on this, but together we can make sure that these technologies become cost competitive. We are prepared to pay a premium price for those technologies today, and by trusting each other in these types of collaborations, we can actually go quite quickly from what is an idea to something that we can use in our trucks. So we are already today gradually moving into fossil-free steels in parts of our electric trucks. But I think partnership is not only important when it comes to technology, because this shift from what we sometimes call a brown to a green platform that will include lots of shifts. It could be energy shift, it's competence shifts, it's business model shift, behavioral shifts, etc. And all these shifts needs to happen in a parallel time. And I think maybe then coming back to the lobbying part, I totally agree with you that we need to do responsible lobbying and advocacy. But having said that, I think it's so important to do lobbying at this time, because this is an ecosystem where all needs to be tied together. So if we develop an electric truck, as an example, but there is no charging infrastructure or there is no green energy, what is then the use of having an electric truck? So therefore, we need to be super transparent with our roadmap and what is going to be required from society, from stakeholders like you, etc., in order for us all to connect on this journey. So I think lobbying is more needed than ever, actually, but it has to be done in a responsible way, of course.
Fantastic, thank you for that. And actually, Sapanta, sorry, not Sapanta. Brain's going. It's late in the day. That's my excuse. Yes. Do you want to kind of just give us a quick 1 or 2 minutes on that question around how we can scale the technological solutions?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think when it comes to change, you need to focus on, maybe hardware, software, peopleware, of course, we wondering about this. And about the technology, I think for me personally, I have clients in oil and gas company mobility. I think technology is there. Technology is there. But to shift from hard-to-abate industry, you need to understand that hard-to-abate industry is actually the community selling. They're selling commodity products. So commodity product is somewhat a part of our daily life. So in order to change systematic level, it takes time to adopt, just like you create innovation. There will be first adopter, there will be late adopter, of course. So I think this is a huge opportunity. We say about this, like, you stay above the ocean, stay above something that could disrupt you. If the private sector could see that and deploy the technology and create an ecosystem that's willing to open for others to come to join.
Yeah.
I think technology scalability is there, but it needs to be someone, some company that need to lay the foundation. The first leak is not easy. Everybody just delay things. Keep wait and see. You go first, I go first. You don't go, I step away. It's like situation like this happening.
And this probably kind of fits into, to some extent, the last main question, and we might well ask some questions from the audience, is due to the prevailing societal narrative that we have, a key focus, possibly the key focus of most businesses currently is to increase profits. Now, if obviously we're making the assumption that retaining a livable planet for all is more important than growing the bottom line, how are you working, and I'll start with you, Sapanta, and then go to maybe Ro, to influence colleagues and other stakeholders to enable your business to remain competitive whilst rapidly decarbonising? Because actually, it's going back to this first mover disadvantage, largely, is it can be quite tricky. So yeah, be very interesting.
Sure, I'll go first. And I think I said, I might offer a controversial view on this one. Look, I think that we need to find commercial solutions to get there. And whether it's a green premium, which is across the value chain, or figuring out how to accelerate things that are NPV positive today, those opportunities exist. We just need to find them. So I'm a banker by background. I was asked to come into this role as head of decarbonization about a year ago, and my mission was to look at our decarbonization through a commercial lens. And that's exactly what we've done. We've looked at which initiatives we can accelerate because the technology is available and the incentives are there to push to actually start to make money off of them. Trolley Assist makes money for tech. It makes money for other mining companies. We should try and extrapolate and do that as much as possible. So there are those nuggets of opportunities today that make money, and we're blessed. We operate in a number of different jurisdictions, but also in British Columbia, that is very, very bullish on supporting the electrification of mining. So we're granted many credits, subsidies, and we're using them. We're aggressively pursuing them. And I've created a roadmap that so far is economic. Now, it gets harder when you get to the trucks, there's no question, but it all depends on what is the perspective in terms the long-term nature of the value return. What is it, 5 years? Is it 1 year? Is it 30 years? In 5 years, it's going to make money. In 10 years, it's probably negative total cost, which means when you take your CapEx and your OpEx, it's actually better to have made the switch to an electric haul truck than a conventional diesel truck. So what is the frame of review for the return of that transition to electrification? On the issue of green premiums, we don't talk about it enough. We have to talk about it more. We have to collaborate across the value chain to figure out what we and Volvo, for example, could be doing to apply the right kinds of pressure to those intermediate producers between us and them to allow them to decarbonize more quickly. Will there be a customer who will pay more? Yes, there will. Maybe not today, but definitely tomorrow. We have to apply a commercial lens to decarbonization.
So one thing I say, because there is an interesting question which kind of does talk to this, is that beyond sustainable operations, which is absolutely we need to get to, the question is how is tech looking to transform its product portfolio, because actually the core of the product portfolio is still releasing greenhouse gases. So, and that's actually a big part of, in a sense, this question that I asked here. So what's the kind of, where are things going within tech on that?
Yeah, so look, it's a great question. Just as we heard, a lot of the scope 3 is the bulk of the emissions. That's not just true in mining, it's also true in the vehicle sector. That's a reality that we live with. So we, for example, what are we doing at tech? So as people know, steelmaking is a blast furnace operation, which requires technologies such as carbon capture to decarbonize. These are capital intensive. They require long lead time. The technologies are maybe not yet available. Do they compete with hydrogen? No. I think there's room for all these technologies. And we got to stop focusing on one technology versus another technology. So what are we doing? What is tech doing? So we actually have a carbon capture pilot ourselves that is in British Columbia for our lead smelter. We're going to capture about 150,000 tons prior to 2030. And we're taking that technical platform, we're speaking to our steelmaking coal customers and saying, there is a path towards your cells moving your steelmaking towards a carbon capture solution so that you're decarbonizing. Is it a conversation? Yes. Can we influence further? We're certainly trying. We've got to work together, we've got to lobby, we have to look at ways where the industry comes together, but these are steps. Right? The solution is not going to be there tomorrow, but we're absolutely doing our best.
Great, thank you. And so, actually, I think the last answer is going to come to Ro on this question that we've got about how do you stay competitive while still driving towards keeping a livable planet. We've got 4 minutes, 26 seconds. Ro.
Look, Adam, at the core of your question is a view about are profits helpful or a hindrance to achieving sustainability? The answer I think of is a bit like how we think about our breath as humans. You need oxygen to live, but you don't live to breathe, do you? You You need profits to do many of the things that Samantha is talking about, but the end goal isn't profit, is it? It's to do something with that that's meaningful. And I'm coming around to the conclusion that given that money does make the world go round, it's better to lean into that, to try and get that to work in our favor, than it would be to try and change the system where money doesn't make the world go round. And to that end, I would say that most, not all, but most environmental issues are actually economic issues. I'll tell you why I think that. Last year, I went to see one of the largest, no, actually the largest mine in the world in the heart of the Amazon forest. Doesn't that sound like a good idea? And actually, as a result of that mine being in the heart of the Amazon forest, it protects an area much, much bigger than the actual mining operation. That's the punchline. But the reality is there are 25 million people that live in the Amazon. We might sit here and think the Amazon's this pristine ecosystem with no people living in it. There are 25 million people living in the Amazon. Talking to the local Shakreen community and the local leaders, one simple message came through. If a tree is worth more dead than alive, it will be dead. So we might think that the destruction of the Amazon is an environmental issue. It is fundamentally an economic issue because we do not value that tree. And you can replicate that across almost every issue, and you realize that if we got the incentives right, like green premiums that Samantha has just said, you will flip the fact that money makes the world go round. So far it's taking us down a bad path. Get it right, it'll take us down a better path.
Fantastic. So, actually, the very punchy response there. Thank you for that. It's given me time, actually, to ask a last question to all four of you. As people go to the bar, and what tasty morsel can you give them that will stimulate some interesting conversation? Mate, just very quickly, what's something that you're really interested in comes to mind that might just stimulate a bit of conversation? I'll let kind of put in a popcorn way, whoever comes up with an idea first, go first. Right?
I would just ask, what are some unlikely coalitions we can build to accelerate progress? And I'll give you an example of an unlikely coalition. For the last 8 years, we have worked with the faith community, particularly the Anglican and the Catholic Church. Sounds like the start of a joke, right? A miner, a priest, and somebody else walk into a bar. And do you know what? We have learned so much from that engagement with the faith community, and they tell us they've learned the same. And we have made so much more progress with building trust with local communities than we ever would have. Imagine the first person that suggested doing that. But it's such a wonderful example of an unusual coalition.
Unusual coalition, fantastic. Well, another popcorn piece of tastiness that somebody else could come up with. Has anybody got one?
I think, building a little bit what you're saying, I think it would be interesting to hear what you think about trust and how trust can serve us when it comes to collaborations, because we need to work not only together, but we will also need to work in different ways. So how can we trust different types of partners that previously have been maybe suppliers and customers and had very different relationships?
Fantastic. Okay then. Who would like to popcorn up?
I'll go next.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of talk about carrots, and they're good, but you got to have sticks. And as a mining company, we're looking to enforce regulations that make sense for the way the industry is meant to go. So I encourage governments, I encourage everyone who's in a position of policy making, offer both, because the mining industry and all hard-to-abate sectors really need both.
Okay, great.
Okay, I think for me personally, the problems we are dealing with is actually our mindset. Because whatever we do business in the world we call capitalism, we see the capital just as a money. But there is human capitals over here, right? There is natural capitals over there. And that things, when we bunch it together and come back to this and say, what is a new premium that we can go for? We can pay an extra money for something that we attach with it emotionally. But this is real. This is true to our life. This is something that we just need the capitalism to work for what they have destroyed over decades, over century. So I think just about mindset towards things like that you need to shift and see what is in the people and planet that we see the business opportunity while we can make the world a better place.
Great. So, just in quick summary, unusual collaborations, building trust, sticks that work, and then a mindset that capitalism has to work for us all. So thank you for that. Like, if you can give a traditional thanks to the panel. Thank you.